You're watching Fish Plates and Scratch Builds. I'm Jonathan, and these are my Scratchbuild Diaries. In this series, I'll take a look at past Scratchbuild projects from my 00 gauge layout, Addleford Green. I'll show you step by step how I used raw materials to create realistic scale replicas of both real and fictional buildings. In this episode, we'll be looking at Addleford Creamery. Wait, stop. Look, I have a confession. I don't actually have any photos of the construction of Addleford Creamery. No idea why, but for anyone who has seen my previous videos, it probably won't surprise you to learn that there was a second Addleford Creamery. Yes, that's right, I designed, built, detailed, painted, and even planted on my layout a completely different building before scrapping it and starting again. So in true Fish Plates and Scratch Builds fashion, let's take a look at Addleford Creamery Mark I. The story begins with this rather awkward corner on the right-hand side of the layout which needed filling. The plan was to add some kind of industrial building that would also view block the garish square hole to nowhere. I envisioned a tall industrial chimney which could be used to hide the vertical join between backseen boards. I considered all kinds of industries before becoming absolutely obsessed with rail-served dairies and creameries. That, coupled with the availability of so much ready-to-run milk-based stock, gave me a brilliant opportunity to run trains I wouldn't have thought of before. So the hunt for photographic inspiration began. One of the facilities that really grabbed my attention was the old Dairy Crest Creamery in Torrington, Devon. I absolutely love the combination of graceful Art Deco lines and sheer utilitarian blockiness. I just had to include it on Addleford Green somehow. I started this project sometime in 2020, and back then, the real building still existed, albeit in a state of decay. I benefited greatly from Google Maps imagery and photos taken by urban explorers. I'd have loved to get this curved window into my design, but looking on Google Maps today shows that most of the site has been demolished. What a shame. I'd highly recommend searching up images of the Torrington site. There are plenty online. I've literally just realised the irony of my lamenting the loss of this building when I neglected my very own miniature version. Let's move on, shall we? After the usual process of study and brick counting to determine approximate measurements, I settled on a reduced size design which maintained the overall look while also fitting in my available space. Because the back seam was at right angles to the board, but the track was another angle entirely, I ended up having to design the buildings with a diagonal wall along the back. This made assembly and design a little more interesting. Moving on to assembly, I started with Torrington's iconic large window. A good, accurate fit was essential here, as it would be a focal point and draw the viewer's eye. I started with a printed template and a highly technical frame made from masking tape, card and steel rules. Then I used strips of styrene to create the beams and bars. It's not an exact replica and the thickness may be a touch overscale, but I think I captured the essence. Next up were the main outer walls. I drew up some simple templates on the computer to help with cutting. I'm mainly using Slater's brick embossed Plastikard here. With the pieces cut, it was just a case of assembling them, rather like a big jigsaw. Thinking about it, this was probably the biggest structure I'd built up to this point. The real challenge was working out the measurements to account for any overlap of pieces when assembled. Just a few millimeters difference here or there would make the whole thing completely wonky. When working with Plastikard, I always use a lamination process. That is, applying a layer of plain Plastikard to the back of the decorative outer piece, and this adds some extra rigidity. This decorative line of vertical bricks came from Werq model making. A good coat of Halford's grey primer really shows off this building's potential. That's why it's my favourite part. I always spray the inside with Halford's black matte too. This stops any inside areas from being visible when no interior is planned. Nothing ruins the illusion more than an obviously empty building. It's camouflaged in this photo, but you can just make out the chimney painted in pale cream, which is essentially the mortar layer before the brick colours are added on top. I'd also created this small boiler house, but I wasn't happy with it, surprisingly. The style is completely different to the rest of the facility, so later on I made a different one with a flat roof instead. All the windows for this build came from the Pico Building Components pack, LK78. It's a pack I use a lot, but there's a single sprue in there that contains a set of modern doors and windows, which have never interested me. Over time, I'd acquired 3 of these sprues, and that gave me a good selection to use here. The window doorway was one of those pieces, built into a Plastikard frame. I absolutely had to integrate the overbridge, another iconic Torrington feature. It's just plain Plastikard softened in warm water and gently bent around a rounded Plastikard base and roof piece. Some rubber bands helped to hold it all together while the glue cured. I didn't plan to include any interior detail on this model, but the huge window at the front just begged to have something behind it. With no confirmation of what was actually behind the real thing, I decided that a staircase would be a likely feature and an easy enough build. I started by measuring the available space and drawing some plans on XL, with cells set to 4mm squares. This plan helped me to create the walls and plan where doors might go. Ultimately, once assembled, it's highly unlikely these doors will ever actually be seen. That's also becoming a bit of a theme on this channel. The doors and walls were painted and assembled in place. At the time, I'd developed an obsession with acrylic washes and may have gone a little overboard here. This staircase looks more like the abandoned facility than when it was in working condition. Next, the central pillar around which the staircase will wind. I decided to keep this as plain brick for contrast with the painted walls. Next up, floors. These were made from thick plastic strip sandwiched between strips of plain Plastikard. Once painted, the floors were assembled to the rear wall. Then the central pillar was added and mid-floor landings were fixed to the front. The side walls helped to keep it all together while the glue set. Hey, it's starting to look more like a staircase now. The stairs themselves were made from a Plastikard base topped with L-shaped strip. When angled to 45 degrees, they create rather nice steps. A simple solution to a problem I was worried would take some specialist items to solve. Some priming, painting and washes later and it's done. Now everything could be assembled together. Some thin strips of styrene painted brown made for some effective handrails. Finally, the whole module in place behind the window. I think this makes a nice focal point and isn't too intrusive or out of place. But later on, I made the decision to add some floor signs. They're way too big and I think it would have been better without them. Oh well. Now the images here start to thin out a little, so I'll do my best to show the next steps with what I have. Somewhere along the line, everything was painted. It's mostly brickwork, which I have covered in previous videos, so there's little point covering that again here. These shots show the building before any major details were added. While knowing next to nothing about the actual operation of a creamery, I decided I probably needed pipes. That makes sense, right? So I turned to this Fala kit, which contained a whole bunch of pipes and other parts which proved really useful during this build. I then added this big snaky pipe which runs through the canopy and likely makes no sense at all. The roof was actually one of the easier parts to detail, thanks to some amazing drone footage of the old Torrington site, and it kind of looked like a tank of some kind, possibly for water or fuel. I decided water and made an approximation of my own, although mine is open topped so you can see the water. I also figured this was the most likely place for roof access and added some stairs underneath. You might spot some other details from the Fala kit that help bring this roof scene to life. Other details of note are this curved canopy with equally curved support brackets, appropriately over-weathered with washes. The flat roofs also got the same wash treatment. The way the pigments separated here really intrigued me, and I loved the look it gave. It felt very authentic to how a roof subjected to constant rain would weather. I made these signs on my computer, printed them and sealed them with Plasticoat matte clear sealer. Interestingly, I went with Express Dairy corporate branding here, when the later Mark II version would end up being an independent creamery instead. Sadly, after about 6 months of looking at the creamery on the layout, I realised it was simply too big. It dominated the area and just felt a little too crammed in, like a bigger building shrunk to fit, which ultimately it was. I decided that I needed a facility more fitting of a country scene. Addleford Creamery Mark II went through a variety of possible designs. A strong contender was this co-op dairy on Ladymead in Guildford. Just look at those lines! There must be something going on with Art Deco and dairies. I'm kind of sad I didn't go with this one now. In the end, the final design was heavily based on the CWS facility at Wallingford. I could only find this single picture online, but luckily the Wild Swan book The Wallingford Branch by Paul Corral and Chris Turner features detailed scale plans. I can't show you those plans, but I can show you mine, modified to fit the space on my layout. It's a reasonably simple building, so if you've watched my past scratch build videos, you can probably see how I built this one. The roof used the same overlapping card strip technique as before, but you can see what the damp has done to this sheer volume of card. It's actually a cool effect, but it's got considerably worse over time, and it's one reason I go for Plastikard over traditional card more often than not. I've actually since discovered that this area may have been the victim of a slow leak in my shed, so this warping is likely more than just ambient moisture. One thing I really enjoy about this building is the paint finish. I actually painted all of the brickwork in my usual way before masking off small areas where I wanted the rendering to have chipped away and show the natural brickwork below. Then the whole thing got a blast of some white paint from a spray can and voila! Removing the masking left these nice patches of bare brickwork to simulate general distress. Then I just added some grimy washes and dry brushed a few shades of green for moss, mildew and other natural growth. The trick is not to overdo it. I opted for square profile guttering and downpipes, which are simply strips of evergreen styrene. The vents on the roof are from the same Fowler kit as before. The lettering is from a pack from Slater's Plastikard, and there's a wide variety of different sizes available. I'm satisfied with the final build, and I think it looks much more at home on the layout compared to Mark I. There's more space around it, and there's room to add additional details too. But looking back on the original building has made me feel a fondness I didn't really expect. It was a fun build, and I still love the architecture of the real-life Torrington facility. I still have this model somewhere. You know what, maybe it deserves to be part of a diorama of its own in the future. Who knows? Don't forget to check out my previous videos in this Scratch Build series and keep an eye out for more to come. Until that time, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.